All right, so basically, um, I want to talk about this paradigm that I guess I have acknowledged and sort of seen throughout the years, and obviously this is related to the Puffy Cassie situation and everything like this. And I think that there's a dynamic that you'll typically find, and please note that when I speak about women or men or guys or girls or whatever, I'm talking about like a bell curve. Okay, a bell curve means that there's a majority of people are at the top of the curve, and then you have people that are like oddballs or like more rare on the sides of the curve. Okay, so I'm not talking about everybody, I'm talking about the majority of people, or a great majority of people, or a significant majority of people, or a significant enough majority of people to make a difference. Okay, so basically, when you look at women in general, okay, you're gonna find that you're very rarely going to find a woman that's going to be wrong. You're very rarely going to find a woman that's going to take accountability for a mistake that she makes, okay? Unless she has a lot of eyes on her, okay? And she is doing it to prove a point, okay? You're very rarely going to find a woman who is going to um, be independent in a great way, okay, and say, okay, well, I'm going to be this new Fortune 500 woman, and I'm going to start a business, and I'm going to be, the CEO of all CEOs and all this other type of stuff, because you have to realize that there is a huge difference between men and women, okay? Women do not get um, applause for buying their own shit. Women pretty much only get applause when somebody else buys it for them. Okay, so a woman's not necessarily going to get a bunch of credit or a bunch of clout, or people are not going to necessarily treat her better just because she's riding around in a Land Rover, just because she's riding around in a Range Rover, even if she bought it herself. Okay, it's not going to be a significant difference or a significant jump in how people are going to treat her if she's in a Toyota or a Range Rover. Okay, there's no real significant difference, but with a man, it's huge. Okay, it's a huge difference in how people treat men who have these things. Okay, you also have to look at it like this because you have to understand there's a difference between men and women. Okay, you see what I'm saying? So, in order to understand what I'm saying about Cassie and Diddy and everything like that, you have to understand where I'm coming from with men and women. Okay, so then you have to look at the fact that generally speaking, women are, they are um, not going to get the clout from, buying the shit themselves. Okay, she doesn't have to become a CEO or this great thing. And then you also have to realize also that women kinda can't be those CEOs because there's a lot of mistakes, a lot of trial and error, a lot of fuck ups, a lot of falling on your face, a lot of falling on your ass, and things like that. That happens. Okay, and a woman's biological clock, it starts to get a little shaky around 35 years old and starts to decrease about 35 years old. When she hits 40 years old, when she hits 40, 42, 43, you know, her likelihood of being able to have a kid is dramatically reduced. Okay, so that's just the reason that you see women finding an attracting in older men, women gravitating towards people with money. Okay, you also find that a lot of women will go along with some bullshit, just to be honest with you. It could be, but you have to realize that it starts at the home. Okay? It's like, okay, she's going to follow some shit that doesn't make any goddamn sense. But, you know, um, if she doesn't follow this rule, then she's going to get, ostracized by her friends. Okay? Now, I don't give a fuck about if I'm ostracized by my friends. I could care less. If they ostracize me, they're not my friends. I could find new ones. You see what I'm saying? I could buy friends. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't matter to me, right? A lot of times, women in their precarious situation, okay, of the 35 years old needing to sort of have all their ducks in a row and be perfect in a sense and not make any mistakes, okay, kind of have to follow this perfect little trajectory, right? Meaning they can't make mistakes, this and that. So here's what I'm saying. Okay, I turn around and she's following stupid rules by her parents, by her mother, her father. Okay, but she's not following those rules because she wants to follow those rules. She's following those rules because if she doesn't, then her livelihood is going to be negatively affected. Okay. And so she goes along with her mother who says, oh, you have to do this and you can't do this and you can't hang out with these people. You can't go here. You can't go there. And she puts on the face like she's a perfect little angel. Oh, yes, mom, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. Right? Same thing with her friends. Okay. Her friends have rules that make absolutely no sense. She follows them. Oh, yeah, he's ugly. Ah, I guess. I mean, if you say he's ugly, he's ugly. If you say he's great, he's great. I'm doing whatever you say, okay? Because they don't want to be ostracized. They don't want to be, ostracized or whatever, okay? But think about how this progresses. Okay, she goes and she finds a man, okay, but you have to realize that ultimately they are providing resources. Her parents are providing resources for her. She gets pretty much everything handed to her on a silver platter by her family. Okay, then she goes to her friends. She pretty much gets everything handed to her on a silver platter by her friends. Okay, then she goes with her boyfriend. Okay, and she follows his rules. Okay, but she's getting everything handed to him to her on a silver platter by her husband or boyfriend. Okay, but then at the same time, it's like, who is she getting more from? Okay, if she's getting more from her mother in a particular moment, then she's going to follow in the footsteps of what her mother wants. If she's getting more from her friends at the time, she's going to follow in the footsteps of her friends. Okay, if her friends are like, fuck your mother, then she's going to be like, yeah, man, fuck you. Right? If she's getting more from her mom, she's going to be like, I can't stand my friends. They're so fucking this and that. Right? But then you also have to realize that on the other hand, okay, so I want you to think about it like this, right? 18-year-old girl, she leaves her house. Okay, she moves in with Hugh Hefner. Okay, now her parents say, don't do it. Okay, but she is kind of sick of the rules. Okay, and there's a promise of success on the rainbow, on the other side of the rainbow, pot of gold on the other side of the rainbow. So she takes a chance, right? She hangs out with this guy for 10 years. Okay, does anything he says, everything he says, the whole time it's, mom, I can't stand my mom, I can't stand my dad, they don't understand me, I can't stand my friends, they don't understand me, right? Okay, her parents and her friends have a completely different set of rules than Hugh Hefner has. Okay, but at the end of the day, she's only in it for the resources. Okay, she'll follow any stupid ass fucking rule as long as got the most resources, she's got the most pats on the back, she's got the most people admiring her, and she has the most chances for success, right? So what do you think happens? Now, victimhood in a large part, like I said, bell curve, right? Victimhood is a large part of female game in general. Okay, so a female will be like, okay, well, this person's taking advantage of me. Oh, this person's taking, my mom. I can't stand my mom. My mother's such a horrible person. She's terrible. Ah, da, 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 da. She goes to Hugh Hefner, and Hugh Hefner is like, oh, sweet doll. Oh, you poor baby. Oh, how can I make it up to you? How can I fix this? This is terrible. I can't believe this is happening to you, right? And that's what she's hoping for. Okay, and so she just threw her mother under the bus so she could get under the wing of Hugh Hefner. Okay, so she can be babied by Hugh Hefner, right? Eventually, okay, there becomes rift and strife between her and Hugh Hefner. Okay, the things that she used to have when she was with him, she no longer has. She is now dependent upon another host. She needs another host, right, to attach herself to. You see what I'm saying? She's been attaching herself to different people, different groups her entire life. She's never been alone. Name one girl who's a 10 who's ever been alone more than 10 days out of the year. I'll wait. I'll wait. All right? So then she finds another host. Okay? But her host was Hugh Hefner, but Hugh Hefner had certain rules, certain ideas, certain credos, certain perspectives. He had a certain rule of law that was real in his world, and she abided by that without any problem. Okay, but now she goes back to her mother And she's like, oh yeah, yeah, I was with Hugh Hefner, and yeah, we did this and we did that, and we did this sexual fucked up thing, and we did this kinky thing, and oh, you should have saw me at the shoot, mom, I was naked, right? Her mother is gonna be like, oh my god, oh my god, I can't, my poor daughter, right? The only way that she can ingratiate herself back with her mother is by posing the perspective of a victim. So it's like, oh, mom, I can't believe it. I got hooked on drugs and there was sex everywhere. And he said I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that. And then her mother says, you couldn't do this? And then she says, no, mom, I couldn't do this. And you couldn't do that. You didn't have access to your clothes. The only clothes that you had were the ones that he gave you. When basically when she was like, oh, my mom can't even buy me clothes. I need help when she was with Hugh Hefner. Now she doesn't even remember that. Okay? But you have to realize that being a victim is her way of getting back with her people. Okay? Uh, Finding a host. Okay? Having the support of a host. If she doesn't, and she says, "Oh yeah, I love what happened with Hugh Hefner. Yeah, mom, let me borrow some money and sleep on your couch, and well, why don't you ask Hugh Hefner, right?" But if she's, "Oh, mom, Hugh Hefner is such an asshole to me. He tricked me. Then she's like, "Oh, poor baby, please." You take your old room, and we'll get together a pool of money so that we can take care of you for the next 3 years or whatever, right? And I feel like this is the same thing that happens with a lot of different women. I mean, there's a lot of different women that were under the umbrella of Hugh Hefner, over the years that basically turned to the Hugh Hefner was such an asshole um, group. Okay, when they were completely down with it when he was alive because he could always offer opportunities. You see what I'm saying? So they were never without. Now Hugh Hefner's family, okay, has pretty much sold the business, and the business was completely reliant upon Hugh Hefner. Now, these women are like, oh, fuck Hugh Hefner, he's a terrible person, he's a bad person, and all this other types of stuff. And I feel like this is the same thing that Diddy's going through. It's like, okay, I was on Team Diddy, and I was everything like that, but now, you know, um, I don't have his resources anymore, and I have to um, find a host. And the only way I'm going to find a adequate host is by being a victim. Okay. The only thing is that it wound up is that it's kind of like, how we're all like, you know, well, if you're such a victim, why did you stay? Why didn't you leave? You think her family's not like, well, if you're such a victim, then why don't you fucking file a suit on him? Right? So the only way that she could be really and then you see how her testimony's falling apart when she gets on the stand. I mean, this is the reason why. It's because she hops from, I'm not saying her specifically, but a lot of women, okay, hop from host to host, okay, extracting resources and just being pretty, okay, and that's sort of the life that they live. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't really knock it, and I think it's a beautiful thing. I love beautiful women, and I love the fact that women offer themselves up in a way where it's like, okay, well, you're making availability for me by being vulnerable, by being a quote unquote victim or whatever. You're making it so that I can mac or do whatever the fuck I want to do. You see what I'm saying? So I'm not mad at that, but then at the same time, it gets a little sticky. It gets a little tricky when it's like, oh, well, look at these pictures. You see what I'm saying? And, oh, that thing happened over at the blah, 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 hotel and da, 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 da. You see what I'm saying? So that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that you know, Puff is an angel. Okay. What I am saying is that, you know, I want you to kind of see the pattern that a lot of people, a lot of women, you know, emulator or whatever the hell you want to call it, over time. It just is what it is, and free Puff.